was like, yeah, if I'm going to throw myself at the ground and wrestle for peanuts and miss out on weddings and all this kind of shit, like, I'm going to make something. I'm going to make it happen.
I'm back for another edition of what we are currently calling Drawing Power.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay, so you like the name.
I like that.
Okay, so I've been kind of back and forth on it, but I've been introducing the show to people to see their reaction to the name.
Yeah.
And you had a positive one.
I like that.
Okay, you like it.
Yeah.
You like it. Okay.
Yeah.
Why are you sticking with it? I'm still workshopping the name. But for now, it's Drawing Power. Which, like, again, we're going to just draw. We're going to color. We're going to just color and draw.
Okay.
I'll give you a prompt, though.
For my drawing or for what we're talking about?
I'll give you a prompt for the drawing, because I'm going to draw too, and I'm not very open-ended on things.
Okay.
But I didn't think of one. Hold on. Okay, so we are actually on a cruise.
Yeah.
Which you can probably tell by the swaying.
Boat.
We're literally on a boat. We went snorkeling yesterday.
We did.
Okay, I got it. Draw your favorite undersea creature.
Well, that's what I was going to do anyways.
So okay, so there we go. It's perfect. It's perfect. It's perfect. It's perfect.
All right.
Okay, so, I guess I should introduce you. I have Steph De Lander on the show. I'm sorry, I was too excited to find out what you thought of the name, because I really care, because you are very cool.
Oh, stop.
You're one of the cooler people in pro wrestling. You are.
I mean, does that mean much, though? There's a lot of losers.
But we'll talk about that. What I mean by you being extremely cool is because you are out here, like, doing it.
Yeah.
You're doing it.
Thank you.
And that is big.
Yeah. I feel like you have to do it, because if you don't do it, then it's not done. You know?
That is very insightful.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. I feel like you're in this, like, I feel like everyone gets to a crossroads in their career at some point where it's like, you've either got to go one way or the other, and you've got to really, really, like, do it and commit, or then you should hang up the boots. And I feel like too many people sit in that, like, in between.
Well, let's talk about that, because your career path, and when I say, like, you're really doing it right now, I mean, you know, striking out on your own. But for a while, when I first met you, you were an independent wrestler.
Yeah.
You were coming in from Australia. It was for Shimmer, I believe. It was probably the first time.
Yeah.
Or somewhere in there.
No,
somewhere
it was
in the
the
States
first time
Shimmer.
for sure.
You would come in for Shimmer as an independent wrestler. But then you were signed for a period of time.
I was.
Yes, you were in NXT. And then after that, this is that crossroads you talk about, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, wrestling is one of those things that's so unique because everyone's paths are so different.
Right.
And you can have an idea in your head of the way that you think something is going to go, and it's never going to go that way. And so you can't really compare your journey or yourself to anyone else's, because, as I said, everything is just so unique. But yeah, I definitely, like, hit that crossroads when I got released, and it was kind of like, I mean, I didn't have to think about it. I knew what I was going to do, but I knew, you know, if I am going to do this indie run, I really need to, like, do the most and commit and try as hard as I can to make something of it, and I think that's what I've done.
Well, because it puts you in such a weird position, because we talk about, like, there's different paths, but traditionally, like, we look at pro wrestling, or at least from the outside, as like, okay, you go to WWE, or I guess AEW now, or whatever, but, like, you get signed, like, you did it.
Yeah.
And then once you've gotten to that peak, what do you even do?
Yeah.
And like you said, you had to really just, like, go for it and commit, because anything else it feels like a disappointment.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I always say this, like, my goal initially when I started wrestling was I wanted to have some sort of contact with WWE by the time I was 25. So I wanted to have either an email chain or a tryout or this or that. I just wanted to kind of open that door. And I signed my contract when I was 22.
Wow.
So I kind of did that a lot earlier than I thought I would. So that's kind of like, wow, I've really exceeded my expectations. But then the flip side of that is, now I'm sitting here 25, I've been hired and fired. Fuck.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a couple of years ago, obviously. I'm 27 now. But, so then it was like a real, this was not the plan. I wasn't naively, when you sign a contract, and this was before all of those like mass releases, which I was a part of. So naively in your head, when I signed that WWE contract, I kind of thought, well, all right, I'm going to spend the rest of my career here. I'm going to do, this is going to be my sailing off into the sunset. I'm going to have the Raw and SmackDown and WrestleManias and championships and all of that good stuff, and I don't have to fuck around with this indie stuff anymore. And then obviously that all changes and things don't go the way that you plan. So yeah, it was definitely a shock to the system of, okay, this wasn't what I had planned. What am I going to do now?
Well, and the thing that you talk about, if people aren't familiar, when you say about like having contact with WWE and like emails and things, there are a lot of wrestlers. So sometimes the process to getting signed, if it ever happens, is very, very back and forth and very up and down. And for someone like you, who again, you were in Australia, which you were coming to the States to wrestle and to get more exposure, but to be in Australia and have that contact with WWE is sometimes really difficult.
It's very difficult, and it's something that I think a lot of and you and I speak about this quite often, but a lot of American wrestlers don't really understand the plights of an international wrestler, because we don't have, as an international, you don't have the luxury of choice. You don't have the luxury of, I don't really feel like this. I don't know if I want to do this right now. I'm going to negotiate XYZ. I might go here. I might go there. You take the first offer that's put in front of you, because you need the visa. And it's more, at that point, it's more about having a working visa than it is about having a contract or a job. So that is a big, that's the driving factor. And that's a big difference between an American and an international is, as I said, we don't get the luxury of choice and being able to be picky. It's your first contract that you're signing is the first major company, really, that's going to give you a visa.
Right, because even if you are perfectly content with, staying as an independent wrestler, freelancing, if you're in an environment where that is not sustainable financially, or there's no room for progression in terms of like bigger and bigger shows, like, yeah, you kind of have to take the next step. And so you took the next step. You got signed. You said you were 22 when you got signed.
Yeah, I was 22 when I signed.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Moved to America.
Yeah, I moved to America. Something that people also don't really realize is, so I did my tryout in the UK. And
I remember this. Yes, you
did. In 2019.
So was that part of that, like, there was like big tryouts? This was
actually the first ever all-women's tryout that they did.
And they did in the UK.
And they did in the UK, which is so random. And they flew me over for that. And they, during the tryout, were like, look, we don't know if we're going to send you to the US or the UK.
So this was like WWE UK was happening.
NXT UK was happening.
UK,
yeah, it already existed. And they were like, we don't know if we're going to send you here or send you there. And I was like, look, I'll do whatever you guys want me to do, of course. I would obviously prefer to go to the US because, like, I loved the States and that was always my goal. I've never wanted to live in England. No offense, but it seems really cold and I don't like that.
Well, and also NXT UK, that was all very new at the time. It was
very new. The money wasn't there. It was, it's like you don't dream of that when you're a young wrestler coming up. You dream of, the American dream. So I ended up getting offered to go to America, which was like everything worked out the way it was meant to, which is awesome. But then COVID happened.
So that was my next question, because I'm trying to do the math in my head. 2019.
Yeah, so I was initially meant to move over in January of 2020.
Ooh, that was a bad time to be set to move anywhere.
And then they said, they were like, look, we're slowing down our incoming talent pipeline, whatever that means, so we're going to move you to March, April 2020. So I was like, okay.
Well, I guess
and then obviously we get to March. No one knew. COVID wasn't really a thing in January. And that was legitimate. They were just like...
Yeah, because otherwise they would just fired you right
Exactly, yeah. They were just changing their schedule. No one was to know that a pandemic was going to ruin everyone's life. But, yeah, so then COVID hits in... whenever, March, April, when it really pops off in the States and worldwide. And of course, no one knew what was going to come. We all thought it was going to be a few weeks, right? So then they're like, we'll delay it a couple of months. We'll delay it a couple of months. Maybe a few more months. Then it's going to be September. Then it's going to be December.
And you're in Australia this whole time.
I'm in Australia this whole time. I've already signed my contract. I'm obviously not getting paid, but I know at some point I'm going to move to America for WWE, but I don't know when.
Right.
So I'm just getting delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed. It was also very stressful because, as you guys know, they didn't know when the borders were going to open again.
And Australia was
very like locked down, like one of the most like locked down countries in the world. So it was actually getting to a point where I was kind of like, wow, have I signed my dream job and now it's not going to happen because of COVID?
Well, and you always like any time you get involved with any like big wrestling companies, like there's always that idea that like, oh, they could just cut me loose at any time.
Well, that's the thing is like I was just sitting here going, they could like they could so easily pull the plug on this because there's plenty of wrestlers in America that could fill my spot and they don't have to stuff around with all this visas and immigration and trying to sneak me into the country, and you know that like they're doing a lot of work trying to get me in and they could just choose not to at any point. Right. So that was really stressful. But yeah, finally I moved over in March of 2021, so it was almost 2 years of a delay, but I truly think everything kind of happens for a reason and it all works out the way it's meant to. So yeah, but it was definitely a stressful time.
And that was in March of 2021.
March of 2021, yeah.
And that was your first time, was that your first time living out of Australia for any like period of time?
Yeah, first time living out of Australia. I'd obviously done some traveling and stuff, but that was my first time like living, in a different country.
So you're in NXT now.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, okay, we're here.
Yeah.
We made it.
Yeah.
You have the NXT experience and then, you get fired.
Yes.
So again, like what like it's terrible no matter what. Yeah. But when you lay it out the timeline like that of just like you're waiting.
I spend more time waiting than I do.
You're waiting. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty rough, and again, it's back to this international thing. Like, I'm not mourning the loss of my dream job. I'm mourning the loss of my visa. You know, because I had 29 days to figure it out, or I was getting deported.
Right.
You know,
and again, in the immigration system, nothing works fast. So 29 days is like no time.
And also, it was like, well, I have to find a company that wants to sponsor me, and the only places really giving visas are WWE, AEW, and Impact was doing a couple, but I hadn't done anywhere near enough in my career to be able to warrant another company wanting to get me a visa within less than a month. And not to mention, I had a no compete clause, so I technically wasn't allowed to speak to any other companies for 30 days. Yeah. So it's like
now that your visa's expired.
Yeah, your visa's expired, you've already been sent home. So it's just like, it's such a crazy scenario. I luckily managed to get hooked up with like a manager who has sponsored me, but that's another thing that it's like, it's such a stressful situation for any international to get released because, you know, I had moved house the week before I got released. So I was unpacking my new house. I had just signed a new 12-month lease. Right. You know, I had $10,000 worth of cats having to fly back to Australia sitting there if I had to move home. Like,
think of the cats.
The cats. Like, there's so many, you know, I had a Jeep that I was paying off that was sitting there. Like, I had so many things that it was like, I set my life up here. Yeah. And it was never an option to move back to Australia because the wrestling scene there just isn't sustainable to make a living. And once you leave the country, you can't just come back. Right. So I kind of knew, like, I have to do whatever it takes to get back and to stay here.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned this because you said, like, well, I got released and I didn't really have the body of work built up to justify anyone signing you, which isn't a slight against you, but you got successful very relatively quickly. Yeah. And like you said, a lot of it was in Australia, pre-WWE, which is not as known, and it's not like now has been happening recently. Someone gets released, but they were in WWE on TV for 10 years. No. Or they were on the independents for a long time beforehand and they slide back in. So now you have like a clean slate. You have to figure out what to do. Mm-hmm. And you went all in.
Yeah.
On independent wrestling.
Yeah. I mean, everything I do, I'm always kind of doing the most. And if I decide I'm going to do something, I'm going to go balls to the wall. Like, when I started wrestling training, within a few months, I was like, all right, I'm going to WWE. Everyone was like, are you sure? I was like, yeah, if I'm going to throw myself at the ground and wrestle for peanuts and miss out on weddings and all this kind of shit, like, I'm going to make something. I'm going to make it happen. So, yeah, I've always kind of had that mentality, and I had the same thing with the indies. Like, if I'm doing it, I'm really doing it, and yeah, that's kind of what I've done so far.
And now you have this act, this pairing with Matt Cardona.
Yes.
Who is another person who, in a very similar way, like, went all in on independent wrestling to the point where, like, kind of making that the act.
Yeah.
Was superstars who are independent wrestlers.
Yeah.
But he has, of course, the different story of he was signed, he was on TV for a very long time. But now you guys are doing this, like I said, like, your whole thing is like, we're independent wrestlers. We're the most independent wrestlers.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, again, Matt Cardona is just making buckets of money all over the place. We have to assume Steph De Lander is making buckets of money all over the place.
Yes.
So I have to ask, like, if WWE or whoever came calling right now.
Yeah.
Is that what are you ready to go? It's hard to say. Your face is like, oh,
yeah, I'm like, I don't know. I think I'm like, it's an interesting spot to be in, because I've spent pretty much all of my career pre-WWE so desperate to get signed, right? And I think there's a lot of people that can, you know, they can relate to that. But I'm now in an interesting position where I'm all of a sudden not in that situation anymore, and I can be a bit more selective with what I want to do, and it's not just I need to sign the first thing that's put in front of me. I can sit back and be a lot smarter and think about what makes more sense. And what I've done in the last 12 months on the indies has done so much for me, so much more for my career than what I did in WWE in 12 months.
Right.
That I almost have to sit here and go, well, I think another year or two on the outside might actually be better for my career.
And you
in the long
experienced like the most negative aspect.
Yes, I was there for like the most brutal year of just like releases and so much uncertainty and so much stress and anxiety that it's like, now I'm here and I'm having so much fun and I'm completely in control of what I'm doing, that it would have to be a pretty sweet deal for me to want to like end this run right now, because I am having a lot of fun.
So we're like a year or so into it.
Pretty much, yeah. It's like pretty much a year.
Because I remember I was calling the GCW show where you showed up for Cardona, which I think you had started in Australia like a couple weeks before.
Yeah.
But that GCW show was maybe about
it was like
a year
March, I think.
Yeah.
So it was like, we're coming up close.
And like, again, so that's been let's say a year of that. When you first started back on the independents, did you have what was the plan?
Well, when I first started on the indies, I was very nervous, because I thought, I don't know where I fit in. Because my style of wrestling is quite like, I would say like WWE style. Like, I don't do anything crazy flashy in the ring, but I love promos and I love like the performance aspect of it. And from looking out into the indies, a lot of what I saw was like really crazy, intricate spots and like amazing high-flying acrobatics, or, you know, like deathmatch, especially with GCW. Like, I knew I had to get into GCW because I knew that was the biggest indie.
Right.
But again, from the outside looking in, I didn't know it. I was like, this is just a deathmatch company, and I'm terrified of deathmatches. So if I'm not doing like indie style wrestling, if I'm not doing deathmatches, where do I fit in?
Right.
And it was really lucky that this pairing with Matt kind of fell into my lap, because he's the same style wrestler. So then the act became, we're the opposite of what everyone else is.
Right, and like more like playing to that than anything.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's always that moment where you're like evaluating what the field looks like in anything, not just wrestling. And you have to decide, like, do I make myself become this, or is my way to succeed to kind of be the opposite? And you guys have really leaned into like being in the other direction, which has been really cool to see, especially in a place like GCW, where, again, like I also work for GCW, and again, it's not just death matches, but it is some of the best death match wrestling in America. But it's also just top independent wrestling, And it's a company that has an established roster and has some established stories, but doesn't really have like the established necessarily like bad guy. It didn't have like that established antagonist. And you guys, now you're doing this thing with Jimmy Lloyd. If y'all don't know, Jimmy Lloyd, who is like the like heart and soul and almost the mascot of GCW, just a wonderful professional wrestler. But you know, Jimmy Lloyd he's a deathmatch guy. He's a indie through and through guy. He's a little bit scruffy. He's a little bit rough around the edges. And you guys have turned him into a broski. The number one thing, though, it's the tights.
Yeah, it's insane.
The tights. The one-legged tights.
Yeah, when he rocked out wearing that, I was like, this is magic. But again, it's like, and not to take away from Broski Jimmy, but that's all Matt's brainchild.
Right.
Like, Matt got those tights designed. He paid for them. He got, like, Matt just has this, like, incredible vision for what he wants. And I think what makes him so unique on the indie level is you have a guy who has, I guess, 15 years of WWE experience, but also a lot of money that he's willing to invest in this act.
Right.
And I think that's why a lot of what we do looks so polished, is because he can go, hey, I want to make a women's internet championship belt. And then he goes and gets it designed and gets it made. And then it's, you know, so I think that's what makes it unique, is he has the budget to be able to take these ideas and these stories to that next level. And
it works on multiple levels, because you can look at someone like Matt Cardona and this whole very polished act with your own titles and things, and you can hate it because you're like, oh well, they're just spending money and they're just throwing money around. Or like you said, you can kind of peel that back a little bit and be like, wow, this is really cool. Like, they're in on this.
Yeah, and as I said, for as much as I'm like all in, he is just as all in too. Yeah. And I think that's why the partnership has worked, because it's not one person dragging the other one along. It's both of us sitting here being like, we are fully committed to this,
right,
and whatever we need to do. And like, that's like, within the first few weeks, we were having breakfast at one of the first shows we did, and I said, look, you don't know me very well yet, but I don't have buckets of money to spend, but I promise you I will invest in whatever we need to do to get this act further.
Right.
And I think that's been like a big key to it working really well.
And it's not just been in GCW. You guys have been able to take this literally around the world. But like, yeah, there needs to be that commitment to that act. And that is something that, for multiple reasons, we don't get to see a lot on independent wrestling. Even so much as like being in a tag team is difficult. I did an interview with MXM recently, and we were talking about the difficulty of the tag scene in the independents, because sometimes it's difficult to even just convince a promoter, like, well, you have to
pay two of
us. Yeah.
And, yeah.
But when you guys can present an act that's fully formed, I think that, like, you know that if SDL, Matt Cardona come to your promotion, like, there's going to be heat. You're going to get that. And I think that's, like, again, you did it outside of the system. And I think that's super cool.
Thank you. Yeah, that's been like I had a little reflective moment at the end of last year, and I was sitting here and I was kind of like, you know, I molded what I wanted to do this year of people that had been released and have since gone back, like Drew and Cody and a few others like that. But I was like, there hasn't really been, I mean, obviously now Trinity has kind of done it with TNA, but there hadn't really been a female that had gotten released from WWE and had carved their total own path. There's been people that have been released and come back, but there wasn't anyone that had like a big indie run,
right?
Like those guys had.
And again, Trinity, of course, she went to TNA, but she kind of approached it in a similar way. I think, like, she was very much just all in on it, wanted to wrestle everybody, and like kind of just kept herself up at a top level, and has always presented herself as like a top level kind of person. So it's very similar to me. Looks like you're done drawing.
I'm done.
Now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we said draw our favorite sea creatures. As I'm sitting here, just realized that I fucked this one up. But my favorite.
Oh my god, we drew the same animal? Are you kidding?
It's an octopus. Why is yours smiling too? So first of all, I draw this octopus, which of course, how could an octopus not be your favorite sea creature?
Yeah, they're the best.
They're brilliant. They're intelligent.
They're so intelligent.
But I realized as I was.
How many legs did you do?
So I drew.
9?
I ended up with 10, but it's supposed to be 8.
Yeah.
Octopus,
I've got
famously.
8.
So I guess 10 is. Do squids have 10? I don't know. But so I started with 4, and I was like, okay, and then the other 8 are in the back, and I was like, oh no, it looks weird. So I drew 2 more, and then I drew 2 more, and somewhere I drew another. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't know why there's
She's got 10.
10. I don't understand why we both chose to give them human smiles, which an octopus.
I guess we're having fun on this boat.
I guess octopus has a beak. I think.
I don't know how to draw a beak, so
Yeah,
I think
and
that's why I went the smile. I was like, I don't know.
It's like underneath. So like us, like I think a more realistic octopus has like a bulbous sort of head, right?
Mm.
And then the legs are just sort of like bloop, bloop. That's not how the legs go, but you know, they're just sort of like this. And then I think somewhere in here is like a beak, and then like the little eyes. But this is way more fun.
I think
Nobody
it's more
wants
fun.
this.
No.
But yeah, if you don't know how brilliant are we going with octopi? I feel like
Let's
it
go.
changed at some point.
Did it?
I don't know, like conventionally. Octopi.
Octopi?
And octopus. Singular or multiple. Like, they can fit in all spaces. They change colors, I think.
Mm-hmm.
They can, like, solve puzzles.
Yeah,
Incredible.
It's incredible.
And so cute. Especially with their giant eyes and smiles.
So cute. Yes.
And you put the little suction cup things too, the suckers.
Big time.
So we both love an octopus.
Yeah.
Because how could you not?
Yeah.
We didn't see any octopus while we were
I think you've got to like go to the.
We just saw some
depths.
little guys, but it was good. But yeah, so I'll throw up a picture of a real octopus and we can compare. This is the one, not this one, but I think this one maybe looks more like a real octopus. But yeah, so Team Octopus over here.
Yes, big time.
It's just like you. Your tentacles are reaching out across the multimedia sphere.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm trying to do too much, but
Look at the lips.
Yeah, cute.
Is that some DSL?
Yeah, it's DSL on the octopus. Yeah.
On the octopus, it withstands the oceanic
It
depths.
does. It's
incredible.
Insane.
So tell people where they can find both your lipstick
This is
and everything.
DSL by SDL as
And
well.
it stayed on through the whole
stayed
interview.
on. It's going to stay on. I could sleep in it and tomorrow I would wake up and
You're
still
wrestling
there.
today.
I am wrestling
It'll
today.
be on.
It'll be on. Yeah, it's insane. You can find all of my merch at StephDeLanderStore.com.
Steph De Lander store. Check out the lipstick. Put
Yeah.
it on your favorite octopus. Who knows?
Who knows?
But thank you for telling me about your journey
Thank
and
you for
drawing a
having me.
beautiful octopus.
Yes.
It's lovely. All right, so check out Steph De Lander, and we'll be back on. I guess we're going with drawing power.
I like
next
drawing
time.
power.
Drawing power.
All right.